And I'd like to welcome all of you to the final lecture in the Spring 2013 ZSR Library Lecture Series, as well as the final lecture for the 2012-2013 calendar year. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Mr. James Byrd, who will be speaking about Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Recovery from Disaster in the John T. Christian Library at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, New Orleans, Louisiana. I'd like to speak for a few moments about our speaker today. James Byrd has degrees from Gardner-Webb University and from the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. He's also completed the Association of Physical Plant Administrators Institute for Facilities Management and is a registered locksmith with the Associated Locksmiths of America. And I might need a steamer trunk open if you could have to. Thank you. James joined Wake Forest University in the Department of Facilities and Campus Management in January 2010 as superintendent of the lock shop. He transferred over to Residence Life and Housing in September 2012 as manager of Deacon OneCard, where his current responsibilities include overseeing the Deacon OneCard staff, card access, cameras, access control over capital projects and improvements. Now, prior to his career at Wake Forest, James worked for 16 years at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary in facilities management, which included rebuilding a flooded campus following Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And so without further ado, Mr. James Byrd.
Wow, well, thank you for having me, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. And I have to tell you on a personal note that Hurricane Katrina was a very difficult journey for me, but in the process of doing this presentation, it's been a way for me to kind of process some of that, have some closure with that, and so I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you, Wanda, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity, and Lynn for allowing me to be here today. So, starting off, I want to tell you a little bit about the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. It's our level chapel. If you were to look at it from an airplane view, it looks very similar to Wake Forest. It has a chapel at one end of a quad and lots of academic buildings on the other end and surrounding green spaces. Founded by the Southern Baptist Convention in 1917, it was originally named the Baptist Bible Institute, known as the School of Providence and Prayer, renamed in 1946 as the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I'll just quickly run through some of these. It was in the Garden District, uptown, and then moved over to Gentilly neighborhood with the completion of about 85 buildings in 1953. It offers several graduate degrees and undergraduate. In 2005, it had an enrollment of 3,700 students with an current enrollment right now of 3,100 students, so a little bit of a drop there after the storm. This is the building that was constructed in 1951. It doubled as the administration building as they were building the rest of the campus, and it's a two-story building, and then in 1974, they added this new wing, again, 2 stories, about 56,000 square feet, about 265,000 volumes, which I have had the pleasure of handling, I think, just about all of them. 10 professional, paraprofessional library staff, 17 part-time student workers. Again, this was all prior to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. One other note that I did not mention, or that Chris did not mention in the bio, I paid for my graduate degree by working as a graduate worker in the library for 4 years. I was the circulation manager in this building for those 4 years of my grad school. So I'm very intimately familiar with this building and its resources, and even more so after Katrina. So on Friday, August the 26th, we get this notice that there's a storm out in the Gulf, and typically in that region of the country, you take note, but you pretty much keep doing what you've been doing. The immediate environment of the folks down there living in New Orleans is that a storm gets in the Gulf, you probably have an extended weekend coming. You don't get too worried about it. You pack a few things in a suitcase. You go to mom and dad's, or as they say in New Orleans, mom and them, and you spend a few extra days. You have some jambalaya. You just have a good time. Everybody knows, if you've ever been to New Orleans, they like to party, and this was no exception. Hurricane parties are very popular in that area, especially from May to November. So no one was really taking note, and then in the 4 a.m. advisory, it slightly shifts the track of the storm towards New Orleans for the first time. The administrators at the seminary, the NOBTS administrators, they're monitoring the storm. Again, classes are normal. So what does the library staff do during this time? Well, they've been through the drill enough times that probably nothing is going to happen. Probably just a wind event, some rain, but let's go ahead and be prepared. So they begin preparing for a possible evacuation, again thinking that there's going to be an extended weekend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, usually tacked onto the weekend when the storm hits over the weekend like that. So they backed up computers, they put some essential files on thumb drives. At that time, in 2005, only folks with laptops were faculty. So only a couple of people in the library, and then the rest of the staff, paraprofessionals and professional librarians, had everything on desktops. So what they could save, they saved on thumb drives to carry with them wherever they evacuated to. Bills, invoices, all the various paperwork that librarians and library professionals deal with on a day-to-day. Y'all don't have to deal with paperwork in the library here, right? I didn't think so. Only us in New Orleans. We packed all that in some plastic bins, put it away, some interior rooms without windows. Again, an extended weekend. Everybody was just getting ready for a long weekend. But check the last note there. No one was planning for a one-year absence. It surprised everybody. So, Saturday, the 27th, 4 a.m. advisory declares it a Category 3 storm. That's pretty big. Hurricane has shifted west over 200 miles in the previous 24-hour period. It's, for the first time, putting New Orleans in the center of the storm track. Facilities musters their crews to preparation, getting the campus ready. I was part of that crew. We put some various plywood, different things in preparation over windows and doors. Not a lot, but what limited that we could do, we did on that Saturday morning. The administration continues monitoring during the day, and then that afternoon, about 2 o'clock, they issued a mandatory evacuation. First one that the school had done in over 20 years. So we're sending out notices and flyers. Everyone is required to leave the seminary campus. The New Orleans city, the mayor issues a voluntary evacuation at 5:30 or 5 o'clock that evening. The library staff, they haven't left yet. We're in there doing some additional preparation. The rarest items are put into plastic totes, moved to some secure interior rooms in the building. We've wrapped some of our rare bookshelves where they're located in rooms with windows. We've wrapped them with plastic sheeting, secured with duct tape. Lessons learned would be that that probably would not have done much good if the storm had blown out the windows. Now, we were fortunate, they did not. But I'm not sure that was the wisest use of our time and resources. Unplugged remaining computers and electronic devices. We wrapped up stacks, the stacks that were out in the main floor, first and second floor, again, wrapped those with plastic, secure with duct tape. Because of the size of the windows, we were not able to put plywood over the windows. It was just, it would have taken too much wood. It would have been dangerous trying to get to that height to cover the windows. We did put some plywood over the director's office, who had some very rare manuscripts and texts in his office that he was reviewing. And so we did put a few pieces of plywood. In retrospect, again, it probably would not have helped if the windows had broken just by wrapping stacks in plastic. So then Sunday morning, we wake up, and this thing is a Category 5. Surprise, surprise. We did not expect it. The city did not expect it. And this party has gotten a little bit desperate. In fact, I titled it Ominously Different. They're expecting a storm surge of 25 to 30 feet. New Orleans mayor finally issues a mandatory evacuation at 10 a.m., first in the city's history. Superdome declared a shelter of last resort. They estimate 100,000 residents remain in the city, and really the city officials were just unprepared. Seminary classes have been canceled Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We all still think that classes are going to resume that following Thursday. So September 1st, classes are to resume. The library staff on that day, they evacuate along with the rest of the students, staff, and faculty. Our president and administrative staff evacuate out of New Orleans, again, the first time in 20 years that had been done. I served on the facilities crew, and I was one of the 12, the chosen 12 that decided that we were going to stay. So we hunkered down in a dormitory that was built in the 50s, 18-inch thick walls, concrete floors and ceilings. We thought we were pretty safe. That late afternoon, the rains began to fall. At 10:30 that night, the power is lost and would not return in full until January of 2006. So that was the last time that we had power on the full campus. And Monday, the 29th, downgraded to a large, powerful Category 3 storm, 25-foot storm surge, starts overtopping the levees of the Mississippi River. Reports of leaking around the levees. Rain and wind begins to subside in the afternoon, but the damage was done by then, as everyone soon found out. Wind gusts up to 155 miles an hour. We had every roof, 85 buildings, every roof on campus had to be replaced. It was completely unexpected, but there are some pictures, and thankfully I didn't put all the hundreds and hundreds of pictures that I had been sent for the storm on this presentation. We'd be here for hours. But most of the buildings were just stripped clean, just bare plywood. Shingles were completely stripped off. We had a couple of buildings with metal roofs, and they weathered the storm. If you're considering re-roofing, take a look at metal. Significant roof damage, rainwater damage to nearly every building, including the library. The library did have a roof leak that we were able to repair, but that was just the beginning of the problems. The seminary chapel had windows blown out. The pipe organ, one of the largest pipe organs in the southeast, pipes were blown over into the main sanctuary proper, and just a lot of damage there. Minor flooding, but to us that were there on the ground, we thought that the pumps, the large pumps that keep the water levels at a livable level in New Orleans, we thought that they were just behind, not able to keep up. What we did not know, by Monday afternoon, those pumps were already overwhelmed, and the bowl of New Orleans was slowly filling up with water. We just didn't find out until Tuesday morning. That's the back of our chapel, and right behind that window is our pipe organ, and it was severely damaged. See if I can do through some of these. Again, water was pooling up, lots of tree damage, but we thought that it was just the pumps were not catching up. Again, a lot of tree damage. That's the library building there, the John T. Christian Library. Incidentally, that is the name of the librarian, John T. Christian. He donated his personal collection of 10,000 volumes to create the library at New Orleans, or actually at that time, Baptist Bible Institute. So that was the starter collection for the library. Let's see. This is looking back towards the library, one of the smaller chapels that we had on that campus. A lot of tree damage. Picnic shelters were sheared off on the poles. Water pooling up. Lots of tree damage. These are 100 and 150-year-old live oak and pecan trees that were just snapped in half. Our campus was built on a former pecan orchard, and so a lot of the trees that were still there were from that time period, early 50s, and so a lot of them damaged. And then in Orleans, we've got a problem. If you're from that area, you'll recognize that term. It's colloquialism, or maybe just a common term that the folks use that I got quite fond of while I was down there. 4:30, minor flooding. 6:30, 17th Street Canal starts leaning. You can see pictures of it leaning. 9 a.m., London Avenue Canal panels start bending. 9:30, the London Avenue Canal breaches. Begins flooding Gentilly, which is where the campus is located. 9:45, 17th Street Canal breaches flooding most of Uptown, including upper parts of Gentilly. And then 10:30, additional breaching of London Canal, bringing the levels in Gentilly up to 10 feet. So if you were looking at a map of New Orleans, this is Lake Pontchartrain, just north of the city. This is the 17th Street Canal, the London Avenue Canal, and this strip of red right here is where the seminary sits, right there. And so this red here is 8 to 10 feet, and then the black is up to 10 feet of water. We were inundated with water. I want you to keep your eye on that sign right there, because in the course of the morning, it gets a little bit deeper, and then a little bit deeper, till you can't see it. And that's the back of the chapel. That was in the course of a day, just about 6 hours that occurred. And for grins and giggles, that's me wading through the water. That's part of our campus, which I just threw in there for a little more orientation of the campus itself, some of our student housing. I asked Dr. McGalliard, Donna, if she'd like to see some of this. She said, no, I don't want to see flooded housing. One of our street signs. That's actually, the bottom of the sign would sit at the top of my head, and I'm 6'1", so that's over almost 6 feet of water right there. And then right next to some of our faculty homes. And more. That's our facilities building. We had 6 feet of water in our facilities building. And then this is one of our student housing. That door is a 7-foot door, and the water is right there. This is the, yes, boat or waiting, mostly in a boat. There were 12 of us there. We had 3 or 4 digital cameras between us, and we were all taking pictures, and they got converted and put into an archives collection at the library that they have there. It's well over 500 pictures from the flood all the way through the reconstruction. This building, our Farnsworth building, student housing, it's for married housing, set at the very back of campus, also the lowest point of campus, and that water level is 8 feet right there. So that was the deepest part of our campus. And then this is a satellite view of our campus. There's the chapel. The library is right here, and the water gets right up to it, but it doesn't go into the building. That's Providence right there. And then our campus extends all the way back, and all of this dark is water. Okay, so it takes 48 hours for the water to equalize. Our hurricane team evacuates out. Our team evacuates out to Ruston, Louisiana, then to Atlanta, Georgia. And another little side note, I ended up coming to Mount Airy. Was in New Orleans on Wednesday and Mount Airy on Friday. My parents live in Mount Airy, and that's where I was born and raised. So I evacuated there and spent 2 or 3 days there, and then got back in my truck and drove back to New Orleans. And after about a month, was able to go back in after a month. And help rebuild. The city remains closed for the month of September. Levees are temporarily repaired. Water gets pumped out. Seminary closes for a year. The general contractor then begins to do repairs and renovations. We are projected to open in August of 2006. This is after the water has receded. Everything that sat in the water pretty much died. We don't know what was in the water. We don't really want to know what was in the water. I don't even like the fact that I was walking in that water, but we did what we had to do, and we did a lot of reconstruction. I don't know if you can see, but the shingles are just peeled right off of the roof here. A lot of the guttering is gone. If the trees were not there, you'd see that it's just plywood and tar paper up there. And that's the library. So the campus is empty, but relatively secure. The Oregon National Guard comes in on the Friday after we evacuate. They set up headquarters there and patrol and do security in that area of the city, using our campus as their point of operations. Library has no power for 2 months. Generators are set up in November, but they only run the building fans, so there's no dehumidification in the building at all, no air conditioning. A lot of humidity in New Orleans. If anybody's been there, spent any time there, it's 100% humidity even with the sun shining. So it's a lot of humidity to put up with. Finally, power is restored at the, it says early December, but actually that was late December, and the HVAC, the air conditioning, begins acclimating the building. There's our National Guard units landing just right outside our student center. And then National Guard, they're also using the library as a place where they set up their hammocks, and because there's a large porch area right here, so they were able to get out of at least out of the sun and set up some shade in that area there. And we were glad to have them. We had a lot of empty buildings, and we were just thankful that they wanted to use our campus as a point of operation. It really helped us to secure the area. Lots of tree damage still. So, from October to December, out of our library staff, 5 of the professional librarians were retained. All the other staff were let go. Just because we've lost our student base, they're all going everywhere, just trying to maintain their classes. So we lose some students. Our main campus is having, there are no classes on the main campus, but we moved to an extension center up in North Atlanta, where we have classes by email and by CIV, compressed video. So we're continuing classes, but we're trying to cut costs everywhere that we can. 2 of those professional librarians were assigned to North Georgia. The other 3 were sent out to our other 17 extension centers at that time, assisting with those libraries, and the main campus is closed until January 2006. Now, that's closed to everyone. No staff, no faculty are allowed on the campus until January, and at that time, it's only commuter students, and we start having some day classes there in January. Library is still closed at that point. There's no regular computer access. There's only 1 patron desktop. So 1 pack, we called it pack then. I'm not sure what the search computers are here for your collection, but we had 1 at that time and 1 staff desktop. Only faculty had laptops. Email was sporadic. Vendors, this was the nightmare for the librarian, all of the library staff, and that was contacting all those standing orders, all those periodicals that were coming in. Everything that was going to New Orleans was in transit somewhere, and it all stopped. There was no building to go to. There was no service, no post office service. The actual post office for Gentilly was flooded. It was underwater. So all of that had to be worked out. The billing addresses all had to be changed. Orders en route had to be tracked and rerouted. interlibrary loan, borrowing institutions contacted so that materials could be sent to an alternate site. Main campus became a non-lending institution at that point. Periodicals were rerouted to extension centers. All the printing and copying services were suspended, and any technical services staff here, that was all suspended for a year until we could get back to the main campus, just because of the assets that we had and just trying to keep the campus, keep the school alive, keep the school alive. Okay, so taking care of business. We had roof leaks in the reference room. We found those leaks in early October, and late October, early November, we were able to repair that and get that roof repaired. But because the building was empty, we did not realize, the construction crews that were working there did not realize that there was a problem inside the building where water had pulled up. The water had pulled up and then dried, just soaked up into the building itself. There are no humidity controls working until late December, early January, once we had the power back on. So mold and mildew starts growing unchecked in the reference room. It just goes rampant. It's everywhere. Mildew has spread into the carpet, the walls, the cork floor, which this is a cork floor. It just completely permeates the cork floor that's there in the reference room. It's covered. And so we've got, thankfully, it's pretty much only in the first floor, only on the first floor of the building. The second floor, because doors were closed off, it's pretty well protected from the growth of mildew and mold. So there is the culprit leak right there. Very small leak. And you wouldn't think that that little tiny leak would cause this much damage. But this sheen here is all mildew. And all that. And that's me calling Thibodeau and Boudreaux, telling them to cut the water off. That's our director of libraries, Dr. Jeff Griffin. I say our. I've been removed from there 3 years now. Forgive me if it's really personal journey here. One of our PhD dissertations, it's covered. It's not a great picture, but it's covered in mildew. You can see where the mold is mildew is starting to grow there, and there, and this fuzzy stuff is, well, you know. And that entire collection had to be replaced. So, 1st of January, we realize there's a problem. Seminary administration notifies the director of libraries. The four remaining library staff members, plus the directors, 5, brought back to New Orleans. They assess. We pulled them in to help us make the decision of what we needed to do. We knew that this is a library, and I had some library background, but I was smart enough to realize that this was bigger than my experience. And so we asked them to come in and help us with that determination of what needed to be done. General contractor had hired a local company to clean just the reference room, but this company did not specialize in mold abatement. So a lesson learned here: if you're going to deal with mold or mildew abatement, talk to companies that have experience in that area, and they know what to do. The scope of work was limited only to the reference room. The local company had no library experience. Again, this was a financial decision that was made at the time, because remember the background there in New Orleans was they were just trying to rebuild, to get everybody back on campus, survive long enough financially to keep the doors open, So some cuts were made. And one of those, unfortunately, was not hiring a company that was experienced in mold and mildew abatement. Again, a lesson learned for us. Library staff was very helpful. They contacted the Library of Congress. for recommended cleaning procedures, and we used it by the book. We went right by their instructions. The library staff, interesting change of roles here, trained the cleaning company on how to handle the books and how to clean them. Hope you don't get called into doing that, but it might not hurt to know how. And then library staff and volunteers were used to continue cleaning the rest of the building. Remember, the company was only hired for the reference room only, and we had the rest of the building, the rest of the first floor and second floor, to take care of cleaning and looking at the rest of the books in the collection. Some of the things that they did, they sealed off the room with plastic, the air conditioning was turned off, removed books from shelves, used a HEPA filter, vacuumed the book surfaces, and then between each book, the brushes had to be pulled off the vacuum and vacuumed as well, because you're removing mold spores or mildew from the book, so that's got to be taken care of. So it was a tedious process. And then every vacuum surface books, all the books that were vacuumed, were then wiped down with ethyl alcohol. The shelving was vacuumed and then wiped down with a 10-to-1 Lysol solution. Returned the books to the shelves once they were air dried. Cleaned vacuum brushes a lot with 10-to-1 Lysol. The vacuum bags were sealed and disposed. And then each evening, the vacuum and the hoses, all the cleaning implements were cleaned with Lysol and air dried overnight. And this is the entrance to the reference room that was sealed up. And then the floor has already been chipped up in this picture, but that was a cork floor that was picked up and bagged up. Everything's covered and sealed. Vacuum cleaners with HEPA filters. There's also a heater in there. Yeah, right there. There's a heater that's drying out the room and running. And that room, it was just unbearably hot the whole time they were in there, that we were in there working.
Jane, is that the way you covered the computers before the, just go back one more?
Let's see, go back.
Yeah, right there. Is that how you all covered them before the storm?
No, this was part of the cleaning process, Wanda. What we actually did is we removed those computers there, and we actually set them. This is the reference librarian's office. That is an interior office. He only has a window to the reference room itself. So all those computers were actually in his office. We had them sitting in there on tables. But that was a good question, Wanda. Thank you. So the court floor was chipped up. Debris was sealed in bags and disposed. Floor was vacuumed multiple times. Again, wiped down with Lysol. We had a new court floor installed, sealer, and furniture was reset. There's the old cork. And there is everything cleaned in the reference room. And then our shiny new court floor. All the wood surfaces in there have been wiped down. All the books have individually been vacuumed and wiped down at that point, and things are coming back to life there.
And when you took that last picture, was HVAC already in operation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That would have been like after August.
Yes. This would have been like August, 1st of August. July, end of July, 1st of August, when all this was clean and finally ready to go back, because in August, the middle of August 2006, we reopened for school. Kids moved back and families moved back, and we were reopened. We had several thousand volunteers scheduled throughout the year. This was not just for the library, but for the entire campus. There were lots of things that need to be cleaned and taken care of. Light maintenance responsibilities, light construction things that volunteers could help with. So every time a group would come in, usually about once a week and weekends, we would get 10 or 12, up to a dozen folks to come and help in the library with cleaning. Every book was vacuumed and wiped down. It took quite a while, several months, to go through it, but they stuck to it and didn't stop until they were done. And when we opened for school, it was complete. Everything was taken care of for that initial cleaning. Every book wiped down, plastic dividers placed between treated books so we would know where to start each time. Every shelf cleaned, all tables and chairs cleaned, vent covers. It's something that we've learned after the fact. If you're going to the trouble of mold abatement, you need to make sure that there's HVAC vents, vent covers, and systems are addressed as part of the cleaning process. That's something that has to be done, because if you're not getting to that air source, then you could run into problems in the future.
So can I ask another question?
Sure.
So if you guys were figuring this out as you were going along, does that mean that there were no sort of experts that you could turn to? Because you know what, if we get this kind of flood, you're the first guy to know. Or were they just all like, was the whole city just overwhelmed so that there weren't enough experts to go around?
I think it's all of the above, because what you had was a city that was just paralyzed. I mean, city officials were paralyzed. The mayor was in another world, and the city government, our contractors. We did probably the first 3 months of work without any permits, because we couldn't get anybody in permitting to talk to us. I don't have the pictures here, but even things that we take for granted, like city police services. The headquarters for our district of the police department was on our campus, using our buildings as their headquarters because their buildings were flooded. I mean, it was just that systemic. There was nothing functioning well. Now, Balfour, one of the leading national companies in mold abatement, had a national office in, I think, Shreveport or Baton Rouge. We couldn't get a hold of them. I have to say, though, that had we gotten a hold of them, I don't know that we could have afforded them. Again, we were just trying to keep the doors open, trying to keep the school open so that it would continue. And so, again, a lot of shortcuts were taken. We learned some lessons. We learned some valuable lessons. But, wow, it was a hard way to go. It was just a tough way to go. And I'll be glad to do the backstroke over here to help you, whatever issues you have. I'm real good at the backstroke now. Some of our volunteers here that helped us. We had folks from every state in the union to come, including Hawaii, to come and help us over the next year. Our director of libraries just jumping right in there and book by book by book. Some of our periodical shelving. And I mean, we had over 150 periodicals that we were receiving, which is a small number. I understand that in theological libraries, but I just go back and think back to all those periodicals that were en route to us and lost. I mean, we never saw them. We ended up ordering some things over again, even after we had standing orders for things. More cleaning.
So with your books, have you either wiped them down with ethyl alcohol
Or discarded them. And I'm sorry.
Who made that decision how to make that decision about wiping down and discarding?
What we did is we went in with the plan that every book would be touched. We would look at every book, and there were degreed library professionals mixed in with the volunteers. And if they saw something that was looking like it was beyond repair, then they brought that to the library director, who then either concurred or went a different route. We actually, some of the information I have from this, I've been exchanging some email with the reference librarian in New Orleans, who's a dear friend of mine from North Carolina. He was telling me that they did not have more than $4,000 or $5,000 worth of books that they ended up replacing. A lot of that was dissertations, which UMI or microfilm was available for reprint. There was a collection of Hebrew textbooks or Hebrew texts that was beyond damage. It was an earlier photograph, that set of blue volumes that was just covered. That set was not saved and had to be replaced. But everything, fortunately, everything that was damaged that had to be replaced was replaceable. It wasn't an item that we couldn't get back. We were very fortunate in that area.
Did you have any recurrence of mold growth after you got everything back in place and the HVAC was on? I'm curious about that.
Yes, it was minor. And so from that point on, the director of libraries had a standing operating plan that usually student workers were involved in that, going through, checking books, wiping down shelves. Just because of the humidity in the city, you just can't get away from it. The building, the air conditioning system could be running at 100% and everything working like it's supposed to, and you're still going to get a little bit of mildew in there. So there was a constant checking. They had a monthly plan that they followed, a standard operating procedure, basically a corrective maintenance plan, preventative maintenance that they were doing, checking the shelves, wiping them down as needed. But no, they will never get away from that, I'm afraid. And truth be known, it was there before the storm, just not to this extent. This magnified it for everybody.
That was my question. So you never really had any water within the library?
No.
This was simply because your HVAC shut down?
Yes and no. The building always had some form of mildew in it because of the humidity. But because we did have some roof damage in Katrina, we had a puddle of water in the reference room, and that's what created the explosion. It just needed a little bit of motivation, and that's what did it. It took off. Plus the fact that the building was empty, no air was circulating, and it took off. It took off. I have pictures I won't show you of the houses that were in water, and they sat in water for 3 weeks. The water drained, and then it was another 3 weeks before anybody could go down there. And even where there was only 18 inches of water towards the south end of campus, the mold was on the ceiling, even with only 18 inches of water. And that's, it's just New Orleans. Everything grows fast. So, post-Katrina, a year later, 2006, all the services had to be restarted, all the vendors contacted, ILL services, billing, standing orders. Rare items, after a year, we began placing some of those rare items that we had put into an interior storage room. A year later, we were finally able to start putting them back into their normal resting place, shelves and rooms. Staffing still stayed at 4 full-time professional librarians, 2 paraprofessional, and 3 to 4 student workers. We were back up to about 3,000 students at that point. 2 years later, we finally resolved some of the items that were lost in mail after 2 years. I shake my head over that all the time. There are probably things still out there floating around. It's kind of like lost email. The library assumes all costs for lost items. No change in staffing that second year. Enrollment's still at about 3,000. So we jump up to 7 years. This past year, we're approaching the 8th anniversary. Staffing's full-time is 4 professionals, 2 full-time paraprofessionals. We're up to 8 student workers. Enrollment has grown back up to 3,600 students. And amazingly, we've grown to 21 extension centers. And as a couple of you have asked, they continue to clean shelves in volumes as needed. And this is, you can see all the new roofs, and all of this is new sod. It's all brand new green sod. And there's the library. Everything's been re-roofed. And the student areas. Actually, the back of campus, this is towards the front of campus with the chapel just across the street here, and then the back of campus is right there. There's a canal that runs all the way across, right there. That's where it was 8 feet. And Lake Pontchartrain in the distance. That's exactly right. New Orleans is surrounded by water, and you can't get away from it. Any questions? Mary Beth?
How did you eat?
Good question. When I left from Mount,
Get supplies to be able to do cleanup. I mean,
it's amazing. The first few months that we were back, I actually left from Mount Airy. I went to Robbie's Army Store. If anybody of you've ever been to Robbie's Army Store in Mount Airy, they carry MREs, meals ready to eat from the Army. I carried 36 cases back with me to New Orleans in the back of my truck. Seminary bought them. I just picked them up and carried them back, and that's what our staff used. Our cafeteria is was not damaged. It needed a new roof, but this cafeteria here could seat 300 people, and so the Red Cross set up a district feeding station right here, and I said it can hold 300. We were feeding 400 people twice a day right here. Red Cross would bring meals in containers, and then we had folks that would serve, construction workers, volunteers, people in the neighborhood. All of Gentilly knew that this was a feeding station, so people could come in here and get 2 hot meals a day. So that was set up in November. We were actually able to get back on campus in October, 1st of October. We had a massive 4-day move out where everyone, staff, faculty, students, came back for 4 days, packed up whatever they could find, loaded up, and moved out. And then Sunday night, we locked the gates for 1 year and started construction. But I say lock the gates. It was passable for neighbors. We just didn't want students, staff, and faculty back on campus because it's a construction zone. Meanwhile, we had Red Cross feeding station, and we reached out to the community and was able to help in that way. Good question.
You had a home down there too as well.
I
right?
did.
So were you faced with the challenge of, because it sounds like you were here for many, many hours during the week. Were you also involved in having to do cleanup, kind of restore stuff to your home?
That's a good question. I had survivor's guilt because the water came right up to my front step, and then it stopped. I didn't get an inch of water in my house. I did not have power until January, but I had gas hot water. So I would go to the cafeteria for my meals. I'd go back to the house. I could get a hot shower, and I didn't lose really anything other than being away from family and all that. And yeah, it was long hours. We worked from. We estimate, because what happened is I was working for the seminary, and the seminary closed. The general contractor was already on site building a student housing complex. The seminary loaned me to the general contractor as a project manager. So I worked for the general contractor. The seminary took care of my benefits. He took care of my salary, and I worked both for that year and a half. I didn't have any damage in my home, but the church where I was working at, I was minister of music at a church about 3 blocks from the seminary. It had 8 feet of water. So I spent a lot of time after hours helping them, usually on weekends. When the sun came up, we went to work. When the sun went down, we stopped because everything was being powered by generators. So we didn't have any power until January. And another interesting story on that, lots of crazy side stories. Pike Electric out of Mount Airy turned on my power in New Orleans. They were, of course, they contract all that out, and this crew, I think, was from Florida, but on the side of the truck, Pike Electric, Mount Airy, North Carolina, my hometown, Mayberry, they're cutting the power on for our building, and so a lot of little nuggets of, I call them nuggets of joy, because in all of that mess, there were little nuggets that would come along. But I don't know how many of you know Mr. Alty, Jim Alty, that just left from here to go to Tulane. He emailed me and said it's an interesting phenomenon 7 years later, and folks down there, he's at Tulane University, have this what he calls Katrina fatigue. 7 years later, folks are just worn out, just exhausted. And as a matter of fact, it's been therapeutic not only to do this presentation, but when I moved up to Winston-Salem, it was to get a break. 7 days a week. You asked me a while ago how many hours. I couldn't tell you. Some weeks were 70 hours, some weeks were, equivalent to 80 or 90 hours. It was just, in the summer it was longer because you had more daylight and you just worked longer. But I'm okay, really. Good questions. Any other questions?
Did you have problems with HVAC because you didn't have HVAC in your home?
In
In your home?
in my home?
Yeah.
No, I really didn't because, again, my house didn't flood. I would keep the windows open to keep circulation going. I didn't, it was hot, it was unbearable. There were a lot of days I just, I had a hammock and would sleep outside. If you didn't mind being carried away by the aircraft-sized mosquitoes, then you were probably okay, but that was only late summer that you had to deal with that, and then the rest of the time. Again, it's surrounded by water, a lake in the north, Mississippi River to the south, Gulf to the east. There's a lot of breeze blowing constantly. Usually early morning, good breezes going just about any day of the year. So the air moved, but you just had to be in a place to catch it. And in my house, I could open the windows. In the library, we couldn't. Good questions. Anyone else?
How were you able to get fuel? I was hearing about the generators and all the other presentations. How about gas and diesel?
Our general contractor was a miracle worker. He had contacts not only in the city, but all over the Gulf Coast. And we were actually getting fuel from another state. We were shipping it in from Mississippi. He had other general contractor friends, people in the business, and he could get fuel. I mean, he was the first general contractor in the city that had 2 freight trucks, 53-foot trailers full of sheetrock lined up on our gates before anybody else in the city. We were the first campus to reopen. Tulane, UNO, SUNO, Southern University, New Orleans, Notre Dame Seminary, all those different schools, Xavier, they were all closed a lot longer than we were. And we were very thankful that we had a general contractor that, I don't know if he pulled strings. I don't really want to know what he had to do, but he was a miracle worker and provided resources for us that we were able to do what we had to do to get it backing up. Mary Beth?
In the list of some of the things that you would do differently, but like what would be the number one lesson learned situation?
We didn't have a contingency plan, Mary Beth.
Well, I'm gonna need you to read hours. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be glad to do that, happy to do that. I think if we'd, again, the environment was 2 or 3 day weekend. In the Gulf region, you get not immune, you just kind of get numb to all the storms in the Gulf over the course of a hurricane season. And you see one coming in the Gulf and, oh, well, here we go again. Pack the suitcase, long weekend, make sure you got the jambalaya packed. So, it just wasn't that big of a deal. This caught everyone by surprise. And so we went back as an institution and we rewrote not only our hurricane preparedness plan, which here is emergency preparedness plan, but down there they just call it for what it is. It's the hurricane preparedness plan. And we rewrote that. The library went through and redid their contingency plan, just in detail. I mean, minutia of detail. Things that, in hindsight, looking back at it, that we wished we had done a little more. I wish now that we had gone into that building in September and saw that roof damage, because had we done that and addressed it then, we wouldn't have had all this massive cleanup. It would have been dust, but it wouldn't have been to the extent of the mold and replacing the floor and all that we did do. It just wasn't a reason to go in there because it was empty, it was closed. Yes.
Insurance, don't you allow for any of that?
Another Another nugget of joy. The vice president of business was contacted by our insurance provider in January of 2005 and said, you know, you should really restructure your flood plan. You have a umbrella policy, but what we, the insurance company, think you should do is put individual policies on each building, which he did. And so we had insurance to cover all this. It was a miracle. If not for that, the seminary was closed. Just a lot of providence, a lot of providence.
Is that what we have here? That way?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but Mr. Mike Drone might. He might be a good one to email to ask. I might send him a copy of this and say, what if? Mike Drone, Michael Drone, Draughn, Director of Maintenance for the university. I'm sure he would know who to contact if he didn't know the answer to, so.
I'm sure the insurer would know
Yeah, right. But didn't have a whole lot of time to make bank before they ended up having to start
Yeah.
paying it back out.
Yeah, I've often, since then, I've questioned myself. I wonder how that insurance broker feels now when he had them change that policy. It was actually a better deal for everybody until they had to pay.
Right.
And then I'm not so sure. But yeah, it did. It paid for most of the damage. Most of the damage. It sure did.
Mike has a plan with the university to tell us where the low spots are and where the high spots are, and if you're under the high spot.
He can tell you that. I'm sure that he can tell you the high points for the campus. He's very aware of that type of information. It's interesting that New Orleans is in a bowl, and in that bowl, when you have a bowl, there's also a rim. So draw a circle on that rim. The campus of the seminary sat on the northeast edge of that rim. I mean, it was just a miracle that we were right there, and then all around us, if you went south from the seminary, if you went north from the seminary, it all goes downhill from there. The chapel is sitting on the high ground. The chapel is actually the high ground. It's 1 foot above sea level at the chapel, and yeah, that's kind of cool. But everywhere else from there, it goes downhill. Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor. And very healing, too. Thank you.